Logic is a liberal art. So if you go back and you look at the first three liberal arts, which all have to do with language, what you'll find is that you have the old language arts program is right there in the liberal arts. It's grammar, logic, and rhetoric. So logic is the second of those. After grammar, which is teaching you the structure of language, then you move on to logic, which is teaching you the science of rational thought. As soon as you open up Traditional Logic Book 1, what you're going to see is that logic deals with three basic things. It deals with words, it deals with statements, and it deals with arguments. Of course, arguments are made up of statements, and statements are made up of words. So you have to be sure in logic that you're using the same word in the same sense in an argument, because if it changes its sense, it's going to mess up an argument. So you have to learn a little bit about words and concepts. And then you have to learn about statements, and you have to learn that there's four kinds of logical statements. Any statement, any assertion or denial that you make has one of four forms, and you have to get it into the right form. It takes a little while to teach a child how to do that, but it's not terribly difficult. And so you teach those four logical statements, and then you go on to argument, which is how you put those statements together into an argument where if the premises are true, the conclusion has to be true. That's called validity. And that's what you're really trying to get to in formal logic is validity. And so you're going to learn what the 7 rules for validity are, and you're going to learn how to apply those rules to arguments to figure out whether they're valid or not. And then in book 2, what you're going to learn is once you know how to test an argument for validity, what you're going to do is learn the 19 valid argument forms. There's 64 kinds of arguments. You're going to learn the 19 forms, and then you're going to memorize those by using this old 4-line verse that William of Sherwood in the Middle Ages invented to help you to remember what those 19 valid argument forms are. And once you learn that, what you're going to find is that you no longer have to test an argument for validity. You'll be able to look at it and tell whether it's valid or not. That's a handy little skill to have. You also have to understand that there are 2 general kinds of arguments. There's what's known as categorical arguments that operate on the basis of where certain terms, where certain words are in the argument. And so an argument like all men are mortal, Socrates is a man, therefore Socrates is mortal. That's called a categorical argument. So those 19 valid forms are of those categorical arguments. And once you've mastered those, then in book 2 you go on to the hypothetical arguments. If Socrates is a man, then Socrates is mortal. Socrates is a man, therefore Socrates is mortal. So that your student has mastered both categorical argumentation and hypothetical argumentation. And then what you do is go on into the complex forms of reasoning, both of categorical and hypothetical kinds of arguments. And then you get into these, there's all kinds of different exotic forms, but they're used all the time. Sorites and epikairema. These kinds of things appear in the Bible, they appear in all kinds of literature, and you just don't recognize them because you don't know what to label them. But they're very common, and we learn those. And then finally, this is sort of the climax of the whole logical system, which is the study of the dilemma. Okay, a dilemma is when you put your opponent in a position where he has to choose 2 unacceptable alternatives. And you're also taught the 3 ways to refute a dilemma, one of which is called the counter dilemma, which is this beautiful argument form. Every lesson in the book is going to do 4 things. The first thing is just to make sure that your student understands what it is saying in the text. So they're going to be just reading comprehension questions, basically. The second is going to be applying the principles you're learning in that chapter. Usually in the day 2 exercises, they're going to be called upon to do that. And then about day 3, they're going to be called upon to create their own examples of some of the things that we've been talking in there. So it's going in, and then it's coming back out again. They practice them themselves, and they invent some things. And finally, just review. Usually the 4th day is made up of a lot of review questions that go over all those things so that they've really got it down by the time they finish the lesson. There are 2 main goals in learning logic. One of them is just to yourself be able to think rationally. If you know in your own mind how to argue then you're going to be able to do the second thing, which is express that argument and be a persuasive person. Now, persuasion involves a little bit more than argument. That gets into rhetoric, but logic is an essential part of rhetoric. So by the end of this logic course, you will be able to identify valid and invalid arguments and be able to refute the invalid ones. The basic logic set comes with the text, the workbook, and the answer key and quizzes. But you can also get a DVD that goes with the course, which is me teaching the course to the student. When most people think of logic, they think of formal logic, which is the mechanics of argumentation. But there's a whole other branch of logic that is really important in getting a complete training in thinking skills. And it is called material logic. It's the other branch of logic. And it doesn't have to do with how arguments are structured so much as how words work and how the different kinds of statements you can have and the different kinds of arguments that there are out there. And the thing about material logic is although it's very kind of conceptual, it is very practical. It will teach your child how to outline, how to do a flow chart, how to define something, how to classify and logically divide different kinds of concepts. These are things that are just a great mental training, particularly for kids going into college. You're going to learn the 10 ways that a thing can exist. It's called the 10 categories, goes all the way back to ancient philosophy. You're going to learn the 5 ways you can say something about something else. That's called the 5 predicables. And then you're going to learn Aristotle's 4 causes. These are the 4 questions you can ask about anything. Okay, you're going to learn that in there, because if you can answer those 4 questions about a thing, then you have fully defined it. Material logic is best taken after you've done some work in formal logic. Its difficulty level is pretty much high school, and whereas formal logic you can teach a little further down in middle school. So I would suggest teaching this course either after formal logic or after you have a little bit of formal logic under your belt. The course can be taught over a year, but it's really set up so that you can study it over a semester. It just depends on how much time you have to spend on it, but it can be done fairly easily in a semester. If you don't have enough time to fully treat the subject, you can take a year with it. The program includes a student text, which has the lessons and the exercises, as well as a separate teacher's key. There's also DVDs that go along with the course, with me teaching the course, that are available for purchase. Rhetoric in classical education is the last of the 3 language arts: grammar, logic, and rhetoric. Grammar is the art of understanding how language is structured. Logic teaches you how rational thought is structured, how to make an argument, in other words. And rhetoric is designed to teach you how to persuade. So what classical rhetoric does is teaches you some of the other elements of persuasion, not just argument, but other things as well. What classical rhetoric by Memoria Press is basically it's helping to step you through Aristotle's book, The Rhetoric. It is the first, and I think still the best, text on persuasive communication, and it teaches you 3 basic things. The first is called ethos. You're gonna study about the character of the speaker. Sometimes you believe somebody, you're persuaded by somebody because you trust them. They wouldn't tell you wrong. They wouldn't exaggerate. That's called ethos, the character of the speaker. The second thing is logos, the actual rational strength of the arguments that are the logical part of persuasion. The third part is pathos. Pathos is about how you enroll the emotions of your audience so that you make them want to believe you. It's those 3 things: ethos, logos, and pathos. The character of the speaker, the strength of the arguments, and making your audience want to believe you. If you have all those things going, that's the best way to persuade somebody of something. So we're going to study Aristotle's rhetoric, and we're going to study the different virtues that people can have, the different kinds of emotions that people have, and how you can excite anger, how you can excite pity. Aristotle talks about all of that. It's in a way a sort of a course on human nature, because the ancients understood that in order to persuade anybody, you've got to know what the human soul is like. And so that's what a persuasive appeal is. It's persuasion. It's an appeal to the human soul. And that's what this program is fundamentally about. And there are actual ways to do this, which you will learn. The course comes with a student book which contains the questions that you're going to apply to Aristotle's book, The Rhetoric. And in the student text, in addition to the questions that step you through Aristotle's Rhetoric, you're also going to find a chapter-by-chapter study of the figures of speech. These are turns of phrase that the Greeks had a bunch of names for. We're going to study the 60 most widely used of those figures of speech. Every issue, there's a book that goes along with that called Figures of Speech. We're also going to be taking Mortimer Adler's How to Read a Book, and we're going to take the questions that he wants you to ask about a text, and we're going to be applying those to Aristotle's text. The Classical Rhetoric program comes with the student text, the answer key, instructional DVDs, as well as the actual text of Aristotle's Rhetoric that your student will be working with. For more information, give us a call. Our customer service representatives can answer any questions you have about the program.